Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We start with transport in mammals, and this is syllabus 9700, and it's the AS biology or the A1 chapter, which you study in A1, and this is the second video on that chapter. And we're going to discuss the syllabus, which we're going to discuss in this video first, and then we'll continue. Now, the syllabus that we're going to cover is the 8.1, because in video first we covered the 8.2. State that the mammalian circulatory system is a closed double circulation. Closed double as opposed to a closed single. We don't discuss that. Consisting of a heart, which is a pump, blood vessels, and blood. Then observe and make plan drawings. Okay, plan diagrams are just a plan of the tissues, and plan diagrams of arteries, veins, and capillaries using prepared slides, and be able to recognize these vessels using the light microscope. Then you have to explain the relationship between the structure and the function of arteries, veins, and capillaries. Then, of course, we will be doing the observe and draw the structure of red blood cells, monocytes, neutrophils, and lymphocytes using prepared slides and photomicrographs. Let's see if we can finish this in this video, and then we'll continue with the rest. Now let's look at what an artery and a vein is. Now arteries all arise from the aorta. They are the main blood vessels. They're carrying blood at very high pressure. Why? Because they arise from the aorta. Aorta arises from the left ventricle. Left ventricle pumps the blood with a lot of force. So both have a lumen. Both have three layered structures. Tunica intima, tunica media, middle, and media middle also has a muscle in it, and tunica adventitia, but the other name is tunica externa. So we need to be knowing these three layers, these names which are typical of this. The tunica intima is a smooth, but it's a crinkled, and there is a name to it, and it's called, the one cell thick is called endothelium. So the endothelium, which is a smooth lining of these blood vessels, because you better remember this got the lumen. Lumen means the hollow part of it. And the lumen in this, what is going to flow is going to, the blood is going to flow. Blood is the fluid, and it's got the suspended in it, the red blood cells and the white blood cells and the platelets. Then let's look at the introduction, different types of blood vessels, arteries, three layers, diverse blood to the capillaries. So this is the artery, divides into arterioles, and then it's capillaries, connecting them. And then we have venules, and then you have veins. So veins, artery carrying blood at high pressure, veins carrying blood at low pressure, because by this time the branching network has decreased the volume, plus a lot of pressure has been lost. So arteries, three layers, deliver, capillaries thin and fragile, veins, three layers, receive blood from the capillaries. So this is a connecting the artery and the veins is these capillary networks which are everywhere in the body, and they have a very important role to play, because they have to carry all the nutrients, glucose, amino acids, oxygen to all the cells of the body. Now this is a very good diagram showing you the two different circulation, and we said closed double circulation. Now what is a double circulation? Double circulation means you have a four-chambered heart, and in the four-chambered heart you have the blood coming to the heart twice. So once it's coming from the body, it comes here in the vena cava and brings the blood to the right atrium. Then the blood flows into the right ventricle, and then out of the right ventricle it goes to the lungs, and then in the lungs it's oxygenated. Please don't say purified. It's not something dirty that you're saying purified. And then it's got to return to the lungs. So there is this part which is called the pulmonary circulation. It is from the heart, right side of the heart, to the lungs, and then back to the left side. So pulmonary circulation, you know, a doctor who deals with lung problems is called a pulmonologist. So pulmonary circulation. And of course the other one, which is in the entire body, is called the systemic circulation. Systemic circulation. So of course these other blood vessels, we are not talking about these at the moment. So aorta coming out, supplying blood to the mesenteric arteries and renal artery and then iliac artery and then the trunks, and then on this side we've got the veins, the iliac vein, the renal vein, the hepatic portal vein, very interesting, hepatic vein, inferior vena cava, superior vena cava, pulmonary artery, and of course the jugular vein, also subclavian veins from the arms. So all this is, now we're talking of a 4-chambered heart, 2 types of circulations, pulmonary and systemic. Pulmonary, the one going to the lungs and back, systemic going to the body and then returning to the right side of the heart. Now this is a very interesting slide, because you must see, what do we see when we cut a artery and a vein and we look at it under the microscope? What do we actually see? And you can see here how an artery looks like and how a vein looks like. Now the other thing which you've got to do is a plan drawing. And plan drawing means just a plan of the tissue. So all you have to do is draw something like this, because this is all that crinkled endothelium, and then there is this layer, right? And then there's another layer. So this would be a plan drawing. I mean, all that you have to do is you just have to move this out, and that's a plan drawing. So you have to just move it out, and that's a plan drawing. So please understand, this plan drawings are just a plan of the tissues. Now similarly in the vein, you can see, you can do a plan drawing of the vein as well. Now the plan drawing of the vein will be a very similar one, but in this case of course you'll have to draw it in the manner that it is shown, and you will have to do, but you won't be get such a actually slide, you'll get better one. I'm just going to show you another one. Now here is the one which is a very interesting one, in which you can see the vein and the artery. Very good, important slides, and you must be able to figure these out. And then of course you see the diagrammatic view of the wall. On the top is the tunica externa, the tunica media, and the tunica intima. Similarly, you've got to see there's the lumen, and you've got all these. So this is the endothelium, and then there is smooth muscle in the wall, and of course outside is the tunica externa, which contains elastic tissue. Why? Because the elastic tissue ensures that it can stretch and recoil. So the blood flow is maintained. Stretch and recoil. Muscles contract and relax, but elastic tissue stretch and recoil. And now let's discuss the structure and functions of the arteries, veins, and capillaries. But here you can see the artery. Now the artery has a very thick wall. So the thick wall of the artery ensures that the high pressure, so it can withstand high pressure. So thick wall withstand high pressure. Now other things that we have to talk about is that the muscle layer, which is this layer here, the muscle layer has to contract and relax, and that of course is important because you have smooth muscle here. So the smooth muscle here is going to ensure that you can divert blood flow. So the fact that in the blood vessels you have, in the wall of the blood vessels you have muscles, so they can divert blood flow. So some parts of the body can be getting more. So the smooth muscle can contract and relax, and this of course is going to ensure that we can divert blood flow. So why do we need to divert blood flow? Vasoconstriction, vasodilation. You enter this room is very hot, so it will be vasodilation, so more blood flowing in your skin arteries, more in your capillaries, and more heat lost. So that is which we have to understand about arteries. Now when you look at the veins have a very thin wall. So the thin wall is important. Why is it important? Because what you have is your muscles on the sides. In your leg muscles, in between your leg muscles is your veins. So what do they do is when you walk or you just move your legs, the muscles contract and relax and they press on the veins. So when they press on the veins, this is going to help in the return back to the heart. So the venous blood is returned back to the heart, because when you're standing up straight, it is working against, the blood has to return against gravity. So that is a little difficult to happen. So in that situation, what happens is that you've got the muscles, Now because it has a thin wall, so the muscles can press upon it. And this of course helps in returning the blood back to the heart. So veins, of course, they have a large lumen, so less resistance to flow. And this is important because as it is, blood, as it is going away from the heart, the pressure decreases and the volume also considerably decreases because tissue fluid formation has taken place. So large lumen, less resistance to flow. So this is what you all have to know about the veins. And of course veins also have valves. So veins have valves, and this is of course also in the leg veins, because this will help the blood to return, because the valves will prevent backflow. Valves can't do much. They will just prevent backflow. So this is what we need to understand about arteries and veins. Now when we look at the capillary, a capillary has a wall is 1 cell thick, and this is where all the function of the transport system is made possible. Why? Because if you're transporting something, like if you're going in a car to the school and you can't get out of the car when you reach the school, well then there's not much fun going to the school. So transport means transporting something from one place to the other, but then it must reach the other place. So the blood is a transport system, but then you have to understand, if this is a capillary and this is the blood inside the capillary, what happens here? In the blood you have oxygen. So oxygen is going to go into, where is it going to go into? It's going to go into the blood in the lungs. But where is it going to go out? So oxygen is going to move out in the body cells. So into and out, you have to know where will it move into and where it will move out of the blood. Similarly, glucose moves out. So glucose is needed by the body cells. So glucose is going to go into the body cells, because the body cells are going to respire glucose and energy is released. Similarly, the cells are producing carbon dioxide. So the carbon dioxide is going to diffuse from the body cells into the blood. So you have to understand is that the capillaries will allow this exchange of substances. Similarly, urea is produced in the liver. So in the liver cells, the urea which is produced in the liver cells will enter the blood in the liver. But then when it reaches the kidney, the urea is removed from the blood. Urea is removed from the blood. So the urea enters the blood in the liver because it's made in the liver cells. And then in the kidneys will remove the urea from the blood, and then of course it will be passed out in the urine, out of the body. Urine is the urea being passed out of the body. So the capillaries have a very important role to play in the transport mechanism. And here also we talk of the phagocytes, which will move out only in the site of infection, wherever there are damaged cells. So phagocytes can also move out of capillaries. So that's one thing which I want you to know about this. So this is what you have to understand about the functions of the capillary, and this completes the 8.1 A, B and C part of the syllabus. Now the next point in the syllabus is observe and draw the structure of red blood cells, monocytes, neutrophils and lymphocytes using prepared slides and photomicrographs. Now what does a neutrophil look like? Neutrophil looks like, that's very interesting what it looks like. You can see these granules in the cytoplasm. You can see a very weird looking lobed nucleus. Of this word lobed, you've got to understand there's an ear lobe. This is your ear, so your ear lobe doesn't look like a ear, sorry. Ear lobe. I'm not saying ear lobe, I'm saying ear lobe. So it has a lobed nucleus. Then of course the outer one would be the cell membrane. And it has cytoplasm in it. But the fact that this can move out of capillaries is because of the lobed nucleus. It has the ability. If it was a large nucleus, how would that move out? But this lobed nucleus, that's why it helps the phagocyte to move out of the capillaries where the site of infection. So neutrophil, the first one that I'm talking about is neutrophil. Then let's look at another diagram. The different types of white blood cells, what do we have? We have neutrophils here, then eosinophils, then basophils. They all have a little bit something like the lobe. Then we have the lymphocytes, in which they have a large nucleus. L lymphocyte, L large nucleus. And then we have monocytes, which actually clean up dead cells, and sort of a kidney shaped nucleus. So you have monocytes has been mentioned in your syllabus. So the structure of monocytes, neutrophils, lymphocytes, large nucleus, it nearly fills the entire cell. Then let's look at another diagram. Here again monocyte, lymphocyte, neutrophil. Macrophage, yes, this is what we're going to talk about in immunity chapter. The macrophage engulfs the pathogen and becomes an antigen presenting cell. Antigen presenting cell. And then erythrocyte. This is the red blood cell. Now that you can see it is the smallest in size. And then the platelets, well, they're sometimes even called cell fragments. So lymphocytes, large nucleus, L lymphocyte, L large nucleus, neutrophil, lobed nucleus, monocyte, like a little, I think more of a kidney shaped nucleus. So you just have to observe and draw the structure of these and look at them at different micrographs. Another diagram showing you these red blood cells help in oxygen and CO2 exchange. Platelets helps in blood clotting. White blood cells, all these different types, neutrophil, eosinophil, basophil, fight against infections. The neutrophil can move out of, the neutrophil is also, some of them are called phagocytes, and those can move out of capillaries. So another diagram for you to pause and have a look at it and remember these. Now let's look at a capillary, and I've drawn a section of a capillary, and I just for my purposes is drawing a line here because I'm separating it. This is the arterial end and this is the venous end. Now what you have to remember is that the blood flowing into the capillary, the blood is flowing into the capillary from the arterial end. Blood flowing into the capillary. Now here in the artery there is high pressure. So because of the high pressure, things are going to move out. And this is surrounded by body cells. So your body cells all over, and you have the capillary network in between your body cells. Now because there is high pressure, the fluid which was inside called the plasma is going to leak out. As soon as this fluid leaks out and surrounds the body cells, it is no longer called plasma, it is called tissue fluid. So the same fluid which was inside the capillary was called the plasma. But now that same fluid, when it is out, it is not called plasma anymore, it is called tissue fluid. And the tissue fluid surrounds or bathes the body cells. But then what you have inside here is also large soluble molecules which are called plasma proteins. Now, so the plasma proteins, say, are 1,000 here. Now they remain 1,000 here as well. But then here there is less water. Why is there less water? Because most of the water has moved out with the dissolved substance in it. So this area now has a lower water potential. So water is going to move back in. Water is going to move back in from a higher water potential to a lower water potential. So the same tissue fluid which was formed is going to then re-enter. So there is an arterial side and a venous side of the capillary. On the arterial side, the fluid is moving out. On the venous side, the fluid is moving back in. Well, that's what we want, because we want this circulation to take place and we want the volume to be maintained. But then some tissue fluid does not return. Now, then we have another backup route. And the backup route is the lymphatic system. And what happens is that the tissue fluid which was unable to return, the tissue fluid which was here and which did not go back, some of that tissue fluid will enter the lymphatic vessels. Now, once it has entered the lymphatic vessels, it's not called tissue fluid anymore. Now it is called lymph. So there are three names to the same fluid, but three different names because they are at different places. When this fluid was inside the capillary, it was called plasma. When this fluid is surrounding the body cells, it is called tissue fluid. When this fluid is in the lymphatic vessels, it is called lymph. So please understand these three names. Lymphatic vessels. So there is a lymphatic system which will take this back and it will enter the subclavian vein just below the collarbone. Subclavian vein, I'm just going to show you a diagram of that, where all these lymphatic vessels from all over the body will then finally take this lymph and back it will enter the main circulation again. So this is just a second route by which this tissue fluid is returned, because your 5 liters of blood must be maintained. The 5 liters of blood which are circulating must be kept constant. So the lymphatic system is a backup route by which this tissue fluid is returned, which did not go back into the vein, into the venous side of the capillary. So it was not returned, so that is going to go through another route back to the main circulatory system. Now, as the lymphatic vessels from all over the body join, they will drain into the subclavian vein. Now you can see this diagram here, how the lymphatics from all over the body will enter the subclavian vein. I don't know if you know, there is a collarbone which is called the clavicle. Now the vein which is just this is the collarbone here, and there is a vein which goes just below it, that is called the subclavian vein. So all these lymph from all over the body will ultimately drain into the subclavian vein. Now there is another diagram which shows you this. So all this is part of the lymphatic system, the tonsils, the lymph nodes, and the lymph nodes are present in the neck, and they're present in your axilla, here in your axilla, and then all these from all over the body. You can see all the lymphatics from all over the body, from the arms, from the lower part of the body, and then you have the main thoracic duct, and which is carrying all the lacteals which had fat in it, that is going to all join here and then come and drain back into the subclavian vein. Basically what you have to understand is that the tissue fluid which is unable to return comes up through another pathway and then enters the main circulatory system. So this is what I want you to know about the lymphatic system. Now we come to a topic of the syllabus. It says higher red blood cell count in humans at high altitudes. Now let's look at a room here in Lahore and a room then somewhere at an altitude like a place in Murray, and look at the difference that I've shown. Now some of you write there's less concentration of oxygen. Now I don't agree with that. That wording is wrong. Why? Because the concentration of oxygen remains 20% here and remains 20% here as well. But which one is the room which is in Lahore? This is the one which is in Lahore. Why? Because there are 200 molecules of air in which 40 are oxygen. The same room in Murray, or at a high altitude, Murray is a place where it is a hilly resort where you go, you have to climb up, and it has a slightly higher than the sea level. So it is at a higher level of altitude. So there the molecules of air in the same size room is 100, but the number of oxygen is the same, is 20 out of 100. Here it is 40 out of 200. So the concentration remains the same, but what do we say? Here we say the partial pressure of oxygen is low. Partial pressure of oxygen is low. Now, when people who live at high altitudes, people who are born there and live there all their life, well, they will have more number of red blood cells. So normal person, say, has 10 million red blood cells. These people have 15 million red blood cells. Why? Because it is compensating for this low partial pressure of oxygen. Because all the hemoglobin does not get oxygenated. So when this less oxygen reaches the body cells, all this information goes to the brain. Brain sends impulses to the bone marrow, make more red blood cells. So people who live at high altitudes will have more number of red blood cells as compared to people who live on the plains. And this advantage and this facility and this biological response to high altitude is then exploited by athletes. So athletes will go and train at high altitudes for a month, or go and live there and train for a month or 2 months. And what will happen is, when they live at those high altitudes, because the partial pressure of oxygen is low, they will have more red blood cells in their body. But when they come to take part in the athletics on the plains, they will have a slight biological advantage because they'll have more oxygen carrying capacity. So this is what you have to understand about the number of red blood cells in people who live at high altitude. The reason being that the partial pressure of oxygen is low at high altitudes. Please do not say concentration. Concentration is the same. 20% here, 20% here. So this is what you have to be very clear about, is how and why the partial pressure of oxygen results in people living there having more red blood cells as compared to the other people who live at the plains. Now this finishes the second video on this. Another video is going to follow, which will be about the components which have still remained in part of the syllabus, is the hemoglobinic acid and the Bohr shift, which we have to understand. So thank you for now.